Italy, March 1945. A Luftwaffe pilot banks hard, ready to claim another American bomber until he spots them. P-51 Mustangs with blazing red tails cutting through the sky. He laughs into his radio. The Americans send children to fight their wars now. 12 minutes later, his squadron is in flames. They weren't children, they were the Tuskegee Airmen, America's first black fighter squadron, once mocked, soon feared by the Luftwaffe. And if you want to learn more about World War II Sea history's greatest underdogs dominate the skies, hit that subscribe button right now. Let's rewind to 1941. While America gears up for war, there's a massive problem. The military is segregated, and official Army reports actually state that Black Americans lack the intelligence and reflexes for flying combat aircraft. The Army Air Corps has exactly 0 black pilots, not one. First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt doesn't buy the military's excuses. Neither does the NAACP political pressure mounts. And finally, the military launches an experiment at Tuskegee Army Airfield in Alabama. Notice that word, experiment, as if courage and skill are tied to skin color. But here's what most people don't know. The selection process was deliberately brutal. Candidates needed college degrees when most white pilots didn't. They faced physical tests designed to wash them out. The military wanted this program to fail. The first class of cadets faces something no other pilot trainees ever endured. They're not just learning to fly. They're fighting to prove their humanity. Every flight test carries the weight of an entire race's future in military aviation. Did you know? The failure rate was supposed to prove the experiment wouldn't work. Instead, their graduation rate matched or exceeded white flight schools. The instructors were stunned. 13 men earned their wings in March 1942, forming the 99th Fighter Squadron. But even after proving they can fly, they're sent to segregated bases. They can't eat in the same mess halls, can't sleep in the same barracks. They're good enough to die for their country, but not good enough to be treated as equals. Some white pilots refuse to fly with them. Ground crews sabotage their planes. Sugar and fuel tanks loosen bolts. One cadet, Lieutenant Lee Rayford, later recalls, "We knew we had to be twice as good to be considered half as equal. So we became 3 times as good." Here's a question for you. If someone told you that you couldn't do something because of how you look, would you fight to prove them wrong or walk away? Drop your answer in the comments. April 1943. The 99th Fighter Squadron ships out to North Africa, then Sicily, flying P-40 Warhawks. The skepticism follows them. White bomber crews request different escorts. Luftwaffe pilots intercept radio chatter and laugh at the novelty squadron. The Germans even make propaganda leaflets showing caricatures, claiming these pilots are incompetent. Big mistake. Captain Charles Hall spots a German Focke-Wulf FW-190 diving toward Allied ships over Pantelleria Island. He pushes his throttle forward and opens fire. The FW-190 spirals into the Mediterranean. First kill for the Tuskegee Airmen. But here's the kicker. Hall's wingman photographs everything. They need proof, because nobody will believe them without it. What would you do if you had to prove your accomplishments while others got automatic credit? One kill doesn't silence the critics. Colonel William Momyer writes that the 99th is inferior to white units. The truth? The 99th was assigned ground attack missions while white squadrons got air-to-air combat. They're bombing supply depots, critical work, but not the flashy dogfights that generate kill counts. It's a setup. Benjamin O. Davis Jr. gets called back to Washington to defend his men before the War Department. He walks into a room full of generals who want the program shut down. But Davis brings mission film footage showing his pilots executing perfect attack runs. The brass can't deny what they see. The 99th stays. But Davis knows they need to dominate. Did you know? During this period, the 99th flies 500 missions in 3 months, more than most squadrons fly in 6. They volunteer for every dangerous assignment, missions where other pilots draw straws. The Tuskegee Airmen raise their hands. Lieutenant Span Watson describes it best. Every time we took off, we weren't just representing ourselves. We represented every black person in America. You can't understand that weight unless you've carried it. By late 1943, bomber crews who initially refused their escorts start requesting them. Why? Because the 99th brings you home. Early 1944, 3 more squadrons join the 99th, forming the 332nd Fighter Group. They get upgraded to P-47 Thunderbolts, then to the legendary P-51 Mustang, the fastest fighter in the American arsenal. But here's the genius move. They paint their tails bright red. Not camouflage, bold, unmistakable red. Why? They want bomber crews to know who's protecting them. They want Luftwaffe pilots to know who's hunting them. It's psychological warfare in paint. Would you rather be feared or underestimated? The Red Tails chose both. They develop a code: stick with the bombers at all costs. Most fighter squadrons chase kills for glory. The Red Tails refuse. Lieutenant Colonel Lee Archer explains, "Every other group measured success by planes shot down. We measured success by bombers brought home." Did you know? This cost them personally. Several pilots who would have been aces never reach that milestone because they won't abandon bombers to chase Germans. They sacrifice personal glory for mission success. Here's the stat. The 332nd flies over 200 bomber escort missions. Not a single bomber under their protection is lost to enemy fighters. 0. No other fighter group can make that claim. They develop bracket formation, flying 500 feet from bombers instead of miles away on patrol. Germans dive in expecting easy kills and suddenly find themselves in a knife fight with multiple Mustangs. Lieutenant Alexander Jefferson describes it. "We turned the bombers into bait. The Germans thought they were hunting. They were being hunted." Radio intercepts reveal Luftwaffe pilots calling out Rot Schwänze, red tails, and changing attack vectors. Some German squadrons refuse missions when the 332nd is escorting. The feared Luftwaffe avoids combat because of the very pilots they once mocked. What's the boldest strategy you've used to win? Tell us in the comments. While dominating at 25,000 feet, they still can't drink from whitewater fountains back home. Lieutenant Robert Days puts it brutally. "We fought 3 enemies, the Germans, our own military's doubt, and racism waiting when..." March 24th, 1945. The target, Berlin. The mission, escort B-17 bombers 1,600 miles into the heart of Nazi Germany. 6 hours in the air. Every German fighter squadron will try to stop them. 25 Red Tail P-51 Mustangs launch. As they cross into German airspace, the radio crackles. Over 60 Luftwaffe fighters are massing to intercept. Captain Roscoe Brown leads a flight when he spots them. Me-262s, the world's first operational jet fighters, capable of over 500 miles per hour, faster than anything the Allies have, untouchable, or so the Germans believe. Brown sees a Me-262 diving toward the bombers. He does the impossible, predicts where the jet will be, not where it is. He's not chasing, he's ambushing. He pulls lead, fires, and watches tracers walk into the jet's fuselage. The Me-262 explodes. The first jet fighter ever shot down in combat falls to a Tuskegee airman. Minutes later, another Me-262 screams past. Brown closes to suicidal range and fires again. Second jet kill. In 15 minutes, Captain Roscoe Brown has done what German propaganda said was impossible. Did you know? Across the formation, the Red Tails are dominating. Lieutenant Charles Brantley downs another jet. Lieutenant Earl Lane takes out a Focke-Wulf. When the smoke clears, 13 enemy aircraft destroyed, 3 of them jets, 0 bombers lost. The Luftwaffe never recovers. Their best technology, their most experienced pilots, utterly decimated by the squadron they dismissed as amateurs. This mission becomes legend. Bomber crews who witness it spread the word. The Red Tails just killed jets. The impossible just happened. German pilots who laughed at them in 1943 are now running from them in 1945. The psychological shift is complete. The hunters are now the hunted, and they know it. Radio intercepts show German commanders ordering pilots to avoid red tail formations entirely. The most elite air force in history is terrified of pilots America once said weren't smart enough to fly. But let's talk about cost, because behind every victory, there's a story that doesn't get told enough. 66 Tuskegee airmen died in combat. 32 were shot down and captured as POWs. These men endured torture, starvation, and abuse in German prison camps. And somehow, that wasn't the worst treatment they'd receive. Lieutenant Alexander Jefferson was shot down over France in August 1944. He spent 9 months in Stalag Luft III, the same camp from the Great Escape. German guards beat him. Food was scarce. Winter was brutal. But he survived. He came home a war hero, then got arrested in Alabama for sitting in the whites-only train section. Think about that. He survived the Luftwaffe and a Nazi prison camp, then got arrested in his own country for sitting down. It gets worse. Lieutenant Colonel Hiram Mann returned home to find his house burned down, retaliation for a black pilot getting too uppity. Captain Luke Weathers landed at Freeman Field in Indiana and was arrested for trying to enter the officers' club. He was an officer. The club was for officers, but not for him. Did you know? In 1945, over 100 black officers at Freeman Field were arrested for trying to integrate the officers' club. It became known as the Freeman Field Mutiny, a pivotal moment in military civil rights history. These men refused to back down, even facing court-martial. But here's where the story gets powerful. These men didn't break. Benjamin O. Davis Jr. testified before Congress in 1947, presenting evidence that segregation weakened military effectiveness. He brought combat data. Integrated formations performed better. The Tuskegee Airmen's success proved it. Their combat record speaks volumes. 15,533 sorties flown. 112 enemy aircraft destroyed in air combat. Another 150 destroyed on the ground. 950 rail cars and transport vehicles obliterated, 1,500 missions over enemy territory, and that unbeaten record, no bombers lost under their escort. They earned 3 Distinguished Unit Citations, 96 Distinguished Flying Crosses, and 1 Silver Star. The Tuskegee Airmen directly influenced President Truman's Executive Order 9981 in July 1948, desegregating the military. Their performance was so undeniable that old arguments collapsed under the weight of evidence. Lieutenant Colonel Harry Stewart put it simply, "We didn't just fight Germans. We fought 2 wars, one overseas, one at home, and we won both." The Luftwaffe lost more than planes over Berlin. They lost their sense of superiority. The psychological impact was devastating. If they couldn't beat pilots, their propaganda said we're inferior. What did that say about their entire ideology? The Red Tails proved excellence isn't determined by skin color. It's determined by courage, skill, and determination. When you combine those with fighting for your right to exist, you create something unstoppable. Fast forward to today. The impact of the Tuskegee Airmen echoes through every branch of the U.S. military and beyond. In 2001, they received the Congressional Gold Medal, Congress's highest civilian honor. President George W. Bush stands before surviving airmen and says, "Your nation thanks you." Words that should have been said 60 years earlier. 300 Tuskegee Airmen attend that ceremony. By 2025, fewer than a dozen survive. In 2007, Tuskegee Airman Charles McGee flies his final military flight at age 88. His record, 409 combat missions across 3 wars, World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. When asked why he kept flying, he says, "I flew because it needed to be done." In 2020, at age 100, he attends the State of the Union address as President Trump's guest. He receives a standing ovation that lasts 3 minutes. The Tuskegee Airmen pave the way for everyone who follows. Guion Bluford becomes the first black astronaut in 1983. He credits the Tuskegee Airmen for showing him it was possible. General Colin Powell, first black chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, calls them the shoulders I stand on. General Daniel Chappie James Jr. becomes the first black 4-star general in 1975, directly inspired by the Red Tails. But here's the incredible part. They change aviation doctrine itself. Their escort tactics, staying tight with bombers instead of hunting for glory, becomes standard procedure. Modern fighter pilot training at Nellis Air Force Base includes Red Tail mission case studies. The Air Force Fighter Weapons School teaches the bracket formation they pioneered. The men told they weren't smart enough to fly literally rewrote how aerial combat is conducted. Did you know? In 2012, the Air Force repainted an F-16 Fighting Falcon with the distinctive red tail as a permanent tribute. It's assigned to the 332nd Air Expeditionary Wing, named after the original red tails. The plane tours air shows across America, and when it flies, people stop and remember. Their influence extends beyond military aviation. The Tuskegee Airmen become symbols of the civil rights movement. Rosa Parks cites them as inspiration when she refuses to give up her bus seat in 1955. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. references them in speeches about Black excellence and resistance. They prove that when you perform at the highest level, despite systemic oppression, you don't just open doors, you blow them off the hinges. Lieutenant Colonel Bob Friend flies 142 combat missions and lives to 99 years old. Before passing in 2019, he spends decades visiting schools. His message to students: don't let anyone put a ceiling on your dreams. We were told we couldn't fly. We flew anyway. We were told we couldn't fight. We fought anyway. Whatever ceiling they put over you, break through it. That message resonates with millions facing their own battles against doubt and discrimination. So why does this matter in 2025? Because the Tuskegee Airmen story isn't just about World War II. It's about what happens when you give people a real chance and what they do with it. Every obstacle they faced, institutional racism, sabotage, inadequate equipment, hostile peers, death threats, should have broken them. Instead, it forged them into something unstoppable. They didn't just meet the standard, they shattered it and created a new one that others had to chase. The modern U.S. Air Force looks nothing like it did in 1941. Today, it has pilots of every background, gender, and ethnicity. The Thunderbirds and Blue Angels feature pilots whose grandparents couldn't have dreamed of flying military aircraft. Women fly F-35s in combat. That transformation started with the Tuskegee Airmen proving that excellence has no color, no gender, no predetermined boundaries. But here's what hits hardest. These men never asked for special treatment. They asked for a chance, one honest opportunity to prove they belonged. And when they got it, despite every systemic barrier, they didn't just succeed. They dominated so thoroughly that the argument against them collapsed under the weight of undeniable evidence. Their story destroys every excuse about diversity weakening performance. The 332nd Fighter Group outperformed segregated white units while dealing with obstacles those units never imagined. They proved that excellence isn't about where you come from or what you look like. It's about what you do when the moment demands everything you have, and then some. Think about this. The German pilots learned that lesson the hard way. So did the American military establishment. So did every person who believed talent and courage could be sorted by skin color or background. The Red Tails forced them all to confront an uncomfortable truth. Their prejudices were lies built on fear, not facts. Today, when you see a fighter jet scream across the sky at an air show or watch footage of pilots operating in combat zones, remember? There was a time when people in power said entire groups of Americans couldn't do that. The Tuskegee Airmen looked at that statement, climbed into their cockpits, and wrote their answer in victory rolls and contrails across European skies. Did you know? The Tuskegee Airmen's influence extends into space exploration. Mae Jemison, the first black female astronaut, specifically credits them for showing her the path. Current Air Force Academy cadets study their missions as examples of tactical innovation under pressure. Their legacy isn't frozen in 1945. It's actively shaping military doctrine and inspiring new generations right now. Captain Roscoe Brown's final words before passing in 2016 capture everything. We proved that given equal opportunity and equal training, we could do anything anyone else could do. Simple words. Devastating truth, unassailable legacy. The Red Tails didn't just win aerial battles, they won a moral war that echoes through decades. They proved the only limits on human potential are the artificial ones we create through prejudice and fear. And they did it while being shot at by enemies abroad and facing discrimination at home. That's not just history. That's a blueprint for breaking through any barrier you'll ever face, whether it's in career, education, sports, or life itself. The Tuskegee Airmen didn't just win a war. They dismantled a system. They proved that the only limits on human potential are the ones we artificially create. And they did it while being shot at from below and above by enemies abroad and prejudice at home. If you want to find out how Sherman tank radios shocked German soldiers, check out this video on the screen.